The doorbell rang on a crisp December morning, just 3 days after Christmas. Beatrice wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and shuffled to the front door, her arthritis making each step deliberate. At 72, she had learned to move carefully through life, both physically and emotionally. Asterisk package for Mrs. Beatrice Henderson, announced the delivery man, holding a beautifully wrapped fruit basket adorned with red velvet ribbons. Asterisk Beatrice's weathered face brightened. After spending Christmas alone for the third consecutive year, this unexpected gift felt like a warm embrace from the universe. She signed for the package with trembling fingers, her heart swelling with gratitude as she assumed it was from her daughter Margaret or her son Thomas. Asterisk inside her modest living room, surrounded by faded photographs of happier times. Beatrice carefully untied the ribbons. The basket overflowed with exotic fruits she couldn't afford on her fixed pension: imported pears, premium apples, and tropical delicacies that sparkled like jewels under her reading lamp. Asterisk nestled between the fruits was an elegant card. Beatrice put on her reading glasses, expecting words of love and apology for the lonely holiday she had endured. Instead, her hands began to shake as she read. Asterisk, dear mother, hope you enjoy the fruit basket. By the way, we used your credit card for our ski trip to Aspen, $4,200. The statement should arrive soon. Thanks for understanding. Margaret and Thomas. The card slipped from Beatrice's fingers and fluttered to the carpet like a fallen leaf. She stared at it in disbelief, reading the words again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the message remained unchanged, each word cutting deeper into her already fragile heart. $4,200. The amount echoed in her mind like thunder. That was nearly 4 months of her Social Security payments. That was her emergency fund, painstakingly saved over years of choosing generic groceries over name brands, of patching clothes instead of buying new ones, of keeping her thermostat at 65 degrees even during the harshest winter nights. Beatrice sank into her worn armchair. The same chair where she had rocked both children as babies, where she had read them bedtime stories, where she had waited up countless nights during their teenage years. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had sent her $30 worth of fruit to soften the blow of a $4,000 theft. If you're finding this story as shocking as I am, please consider joining our community by hitting that subscribe button below. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Her mind drifted back to the beginning, to the choices that had led her to this moment of profound betrayal. Harold, her husband of 43 years, had passed away 5 years ago, leaving her not only heartbroken but financially vulnerable. She had trusted Margaret, her eldest at 45, to help manage some of her affairs. Margaret was a successful real estate agent with a sprawling house in the suburbs, married to Robert, a corporate lawyer who drove luxury cars and wore expensive suits. Thomas, 3 years younger than his sister, worked in marketing for a tech company. He lived in a downtown penthouse with his wife Jessica, a woman 30 years his junior, who had never worked a day in her life but possessed an impressive collection of designer handbags. Both of her children had achieved the American dream that Beatrice and Harold had sacrificed so much to provide. They had worked double shifts at the factory, Harold in manufacturing and Beatrice in quality control, saving every penny for their children's college educations. They had driven second-hand cars for decades, lived in a small house with outdated appliances, and rarely took vacations. Also, Margaret and Thomas could have opportunities they never had. The college tuition, the down payment help for their They helped for their first homes, the countless emergency loans that were never repaid. Beatrice had given freely, believing that family meant everything. She had even co-signed for Thomas's business loan when he briefly tried to start his own marketing firm, a venture that failed spectacularly, leaving her liable for $12,000 in debt. that she was still paying off in small monthly installments. Asterisk, and now this. They had taken her credit card information, probably during one of Margaret's visits when she had helped Beatrice with online banking, and used it without permission for a luxury vacation while their mother counted coupons and worried about heating. Bills. Asterisk, Beatrice reached for her phone with shaking hands and dialed Margaret's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Thomas next, with the same result. Of course, they were unavailable. They were probably still in Aspen, skiing down pristine slopes with equipment that cost more than Beatrice spent on groceries in 6 months. Asterisk, she left carefully worded messages, trying to keep the hurt and anger from her voice. Hello, dear. I received your fruit basket and your note. Please call me when you have a moment. We need to discuss this situation. Asterisk, days passed without a response. Beatrice called repeatedly, each unanswered ring feeling like another small death. She imagined them seeing her name on their phones and deliberately ignoring her calls. Perhaps laughing about the old woman who was making a fuss over money? Asterisk. Stories like Beatrice's remind us why it's so important to support each other. If this story is touching your heart, please click subscribe to stay connected with our community. Asterisk. The credit card statement arrived on New Year's Eve. A cruel end to what had already been a devastating year. The charges were itemized with painful precision: luxury hotel accommodations, premium ski passes, expensive dinners at 5-star restaurants, spa treatments, and shopping sprees at high-end boutiques. They had lived like royalty for a week using their mother's life savings. Asterisk, but what hurt more than the money was the casual nature of their betrayal. The fruit basket wasn't an apology. It was an afterthought, a token gesture meant to assuage their guilt. The note's tone suggested they expected her to simply accept this theft as another family obligation, another sacrifice she should make willingly for their happiness. Asterisk. Beatrice spent New Year's Eve alone in her chair, holding the statement and crying tears she thought she had no more left to shed. She thought about Harold, about how he would have reacted to this betrayal. He had always been protective of their children, sometimes too much so, making excuses for their selfishness even, when it was obvious. But this would have broken his heart just as it was breaking hers. Asterisk. The next morning, Beatrice made a decision that surprised even herself. She had always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over conflicts and maintained family harmony at any cost. But at 72, she was tired of being taken advantage of. Tired of being seen as an endless source of financial support rather than a mother deserving of love and respect. Asterisk. She called her bank and reported the unauthorized charges. The representative was kind but thorough, explaining the process for disputing fraudulent transactions. When asked about the perpetrators, Beatrice's voice remained steady as she said, "My children used my card without permission." Asterisk. The investigation would take weeks, but the bank immediately reversed the charges and issued her a new credit card. For the first time in days, Beatrice felt a small spark of empowerment. She wasn't completely helpless after all. Asterisk. But the legal action was only the beginning. Beatrice realized that her relationship with her children was fundamentally broken. Had perhaps been broken for years without her wanting to acknowledge it. They saw her as a bank account with legs, a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be cherished. Asterisk. She began documenting every financial transaction she could remember: the college tuition payments, the home down payments, the emergency loans, the co-signed debts. The total was staggering, over $150,000 given freely over the years, money that had come from her and Harold's hard work and careful saving. Asterisk. If you're invested in seeing how Beatrice's story unfolds, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your engagement helps us bring you more compelling stories about real people facing real challenges. Asterisk. Margaret finally called 2 weeks later, her voice tight with anger. "Mother, what have you done? The bank is investigating us for fraud." Asterisk. "I reported unauthorized use of my credit card. Beatrice replied calmly. Because that's exactly what it was. Asterisk, but we're family. You can't seriously be pressing charges against your own children? Asterisk, the audacity took Beatrice's breath away. Family doesn't steal from each other, Margaret. Family doesn't leave there. Elderly mother alone on Christmas and then steal her money for a vacation. Asterisk, it was a loan. We were going to pay you back. Asterisk, a loan requires asking permission first. A loan requires agreement from both parties. What you did was theft, plain and simple. Asterisk, the conversation deteriorated quickly, with Margaret screaming accusations and threats before hanging up. Thomas called an hour later, his approach more manipulative. He cried, claimed he was having financial difficulties, said Jessica was threatening to leave him if they didn't maintain their lifestyle. He begged Beatrice to drop the investigation, promising to pay her back over time. Asterisk, but Beatrice had heard these promises before. She had fallen for the tears and manipulation countless times, always believing that this time would be different, that her children would finally appreciate her sacrifices and treat her with the respect she deserved. Asterisk, I'm not dropping anything. Thomas, what you and your sister did was wrong, and there have to be consequences. Asterisk, but Mom, we're your children. We're the only family you have left. Asterisk, those words stung because they were partially true. But Beatrice was beginning to understand that being alone was better than being surrounded by people who saw her only as a means to an end. Asterisk, the next few months were difficult. Margaret and Thomas hired lawyers, claiming the credit card charges were authorized, that Beatrice had given them permission during a phone call they couldn't quite prove had happened. They painted her as a confused elderly woman who had forgotten giving them permission, a narrative that was both insulting and strategic. Asterisk, but Beatrice had been meticulous in her record keeping. And the bank's investigation revealed a pattern of unauthorized usage that went back months. Small charges at first, a dinner here, a gas fill-up there, that had escalated to the massive Aspen expenditure. Her children had been stealing from her gradually, testing to see how much they could take before she noticed. Asterisk, the legal proceedings moved slowly, but Beatrice found unexpected strength in the process. She wasn't just fighting for her money, she was fighting for her dignity, for the principle that family relationships shouldn't be built on exploitation and manipulation. Asterisk, during this time, she discovered a community she hadn't known existed. Other elderly people who had been financially abused by their own families. Support groups where she could share her story without judgment, where her pain was understood and validated. She wasn't alone in her experience, though that knowledge brought both comfort and sadness. Asterisk, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, an 8-year-old woman whose son had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage, became a particular friend. The hardest part, Dorothy told her over tea one afternoon, isn't the money. It's accepting that the children we raised and loved could be capable of such cruelty. Asterisk, Beatrice nodded, understanding completely. She had spent months questioning herself, wondering where she had gone wrong as a mother, what she could have done differently to raise children who valued her for more than her bank account. Asterisk, the answer, she eventually realized, was nothing. She had been a good mother, perhaps too good. She had given too much, asked for too little in return, and enabled behavior that should have been corrected years ago. Her unconditional love had been taken for granted and exploited. Asterisk, 6 months after the Aspen incident, the bank ruled in Beatrice's favor. Margaret and Thomas were required to pay restitution, not just for the vacation charges, but for months of unauthorized usage. The legal fees they had incurred fighting the investigation far exceeded what they would have paid if they had simply apologized and made things right from the beginning. Asterisk, but the money was only part of Beatrice's victory. More importantly, she had reclaimed her self-respect and established boundaries she should have set years ago. She changed her phone number and didn't give the new one to her children. She updated her will, leaving her modest estate to various charities instead of to the children who had shown such little regard for her well-being. Asterisk. Margaret and Thomas tried different approaches to reconciliation over the following months. They sent flowers with cards claiming they missed her. They had Margaret's children, Beatrice's grandchildren, call and ask why Grandma didn't visit anymore. They even showed up at her door on her 73rd birthday, carrying an expensive cake and acting as if nothing had happened. Asterisk. But Beatrice had learned to recognize manipulation in all its forms. She accepted the cake politely, but didn't invite them in. If you want a relationship with me, she told them through the screen door, it starts with a genuine apology and changed behavior. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. Asterisk. They left angry, probably assuming she would eventually cave as she always had before. But this time was different. Beatrice had discovered something precious in her 70s. The power of saying no. The strength that comes from refusing to be a victim. The peace that follows when you stop trying to buy love from people who are incapable of giving it freely. Asterisk. She began volunteering at a local senior center, helping other elderly people navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges of family financial abuse. Her own painful experience had given her insights and empathy that helped others heal. She found purpose in her pain and community. In her solitude, asterisk, a year after the fruit basket incident, Beatrice received a letter from Thomas. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter, something he hadn't done since childhood thank you notes she had required him to write. The letter was different from his previous attempts at contact. There were no excuses, no justifications, no request for money or forgiveness he hadn't earned. Asterisk instead. He wrote about the therapy he had started, about finally recognizing the pattern of entitlement and exploitation that had defined his relationship with his mother. He wrote about his divorce from Jessica, about downsizing his lifestyle, about getting a second job to pay back money he had taken not just from Beatrice but from other family members over the years. Asterisk, I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm ashamed. You deserved so much better from the children you raised with such love and sacrifice. Asterisk, the letter moved Beatrice in ways the flowers and manipulative phone calls never had. It was the first time either of her children had taken full responsibility for their actions without expecting something in return. She didn't respond immediately, needing time to process emotions that were complicated and deep. Asterisk, Margaret's acknowledgement came differently. She didn't write a letter or make a dramatic gesture. Instead, she quietly began paying back the money she owed. Not just from the ski trip, but from years of borrowed funds that had never been repaid. The payments arrived monthly without fanfare or expectation of gratitude, accompanied only by brief notes that said payment 3 of 48 or payment 7 of 48. Asterisk, it wasn't an apology exactly, but it was action, and Beatrice had learned to value actions over words. Margaret was taking responsibility in the way she knew how, through the practical gesture of making financial amends. Asterisk, by her 74th birthday. Beatrice had achieved something she never thought possible. She was genuinely happy living alone. Her small house felt peaceful rather than lonely. Her days were filled with volunteer work, her new friendships, and hobbies she had neglected for decades while focusing on her children's needs. Asterisk. She had also achieved financial stability for the first time since Harold's death. The restitution payments, combined with her careful budgeting and the end of constant financial requests from her children, allowed her to build a small emergency fund and even take a modest vacation, her first in 15 years. Asterisk, the fruit basket had been thrown away long ago, but Beatrice kept the note that had come with it, not as a reminder of her pain, but as evidence of how far she had traveled from that moment of devastation to this place of hard-won peace. The note represented the end of one chapter of her life and the beginning of another. A chapter where she was the author of her own story rather than a supporting character in her children's narratives. Asterisk. Sometimes she wondered if she had been too harsh, if she should have been more forgiving, more understanding of her children's financial pressures and lifestyle choices. But then she would remember the casual cruelty of that note, the months of ignored phone calls, the years of taking her love and generosity for granted. Asterisk forgiveness, she had learned, didn't require reconciliation. She could forgive her children for her own peace of mind while still maintaining the boundaries necessary for her well-being. Love didn't mean accepting abuse, even from family members. Asterisk on quiet evenings, sitting in Harold's old chair with a cup of tea and a good book, Beatrice sometimes felt his presence. She imagined him proud of the strength she had found, the way she had finally learned to value herself as much as she had always valued their children. Asterisk. The fruit basket incident had been the weed catalyst for the most difficult and ultimately most liberating year of her life. It had forced her to confront painful truths about her relationships with her children and make changes she might never have had the courage to make otherwise. Asterisk. Beatrice Henderson had learned that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Never too late to establish boundaries, never too late to choose peace over chaos. At 74, she was finally living life on her own terms. And that was a gift more precious than any fruit basket could ever be. Asterisk.